city grounds.
Good evening, everyone. I am so happy to be here tonight and so thankful that all of you all are here. We all know how important this election is. Please make sure you're sharing now on your social media, texting your friends, let them know that they can get on live stream to check this out. Tonight is a really important night. I want to thank everybody who helped to organize this event. First and foremost, I want to give honor to my pastor, Pastor Bruce Williams, who is the head of this church, our church, Faith Memorial Baptist Church. I also want to acknowledge the president of the Louisville Urban League Young Professionals, Simone Simply. This sister, if you could just stand up for a second, please. She has worked very hard. Also, the ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha are here and present. They were also supportive in the organizing of this event. And have I left a group off? I think that's everybody. Okay, wonderful. What we are going to do tonight, first we are going to start with a group of young leaders. We will start with that panel, and then when they finish, they are going to exit the stage. When they exit, all of the other panelists will then take their seats. And panelists, I'll let you know that you'll see your names, and so you're just going to sit in the place where you see your names listed. And we will have several small discussions about the different issues that we've already talked about, okay? We're going to talk about Amendment 1, we're going to talk about Amendment 2, we're going to talk about these attacks on DEI that are happening in Frankfurt, the very real organized attacks that are happening against our community, against our city. We're going to talk about those things. And we're certainly going to talk about Project 2025 and all of the ways that it could impact our country. I want everybody here, all the panelists know this, but I'll say it to you all. You may want us to push a little bit harder. Remember, we are in this church, and most of the organizations, every organization actually that I've listed, and we're all 501c3s. We're not interested in telling you who to vote for. What we want you to be is informed. What we want to make sure is that you understand the impact of your vote and what issues are on the table and how those things affect the communities that we love so much. And so with that, before we start in full, I want to ask Anthony Christian to come up and give us a word of prayer, and he is still in this room. And if he is not, then I'm going to get, don't go get him, that's okay. We're going to get the assistant to pray. Come on up for us. Tony, please. And nothing like the prayer.
Let us pray. Oh God, we just thank you for this opportunity once again to come together, oh God. We pray that you will be with us in this during this evening, that we will be on one accord, oh Lord, that you will just speak to our hearts and our minds through all the panelists who will bring their perspectives of all the things that are important when it comes to our voting, oh God. We thank you that you give us an opportunity to just share and just pray that what is presented will be spread abroad and many people will hear and be well informed and know exactly how they must vote when it comes to election day this season. We thank you and we ask that you will be with us throughout this evening. It's in your name we ask and pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. And with that, I want to take just a moment. I'm not going to read her entire bio. She is a very accomplished woman, but I will tell you that the person who will be moderating this panel is Selena Fishback. She serves as the director of the Louisville Teacher Residency in the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Poverty with Jefferson County Public Schools. Ms. Fishback is a native of Bowling Green, Kentucky, and earned a Bachelor's of Science in Elementary Education from Western Kentucky University. She's continued her education at the University of Louisville, earning a Master's of Education in Counseling and Personnel Services, and she is now pursuing her Doctor of Education in Educational Leadership and Organizational Development. So blah, 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 she's a phenomenal sister. That's what you need to remember. Selena Fishback is going to be moderating. I will turn this panel over to her. Thank you all so much.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for the a wonderful introduction. I am honored to be here so that we are able to amplify the voices of young voters within our community. And with that, I would love to introduce to you our panelists. We have Nina Owens, who is a part of the 2024 graduating class from the University of Louisville. As a student, he served as the vice president of the Martin Luther King Jr. Scholars Society, editor-in-chief for the Local Political Review, and a literacy mentor for the Decode Project. He's currently working in the Office of Housing and Community Development at Louisville Metro Government. So welcome, Nina. We also have Alexi Miller. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Animal Science from Auburn University, a Master's of Science in Criminal Justice from the University of Louisville, and is currently a student or a PhD candidate in criminal justice at the University of Louisville. Alexi works in research and is a lecturer in criminal justice department at the university. She is also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And our final panelist this evening is Edward John Hatton Jr. He is a senior studying political science and a dedicated member of the Martin Luther King Scholarship Program, as well as the president of Alpha Pi chapter of Alpha Pi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, where he champions leadership and community service while promoting social justice. His internship with the councilwoman, Shamika Parrish Wright, provides him with hands-on experience in public policy and grassroots advocacy. So welcome, Edward. And so, of course, this evening, we definitely want to hear from you all on the importance of voting and how it impacts young voters within our community. So let's start out with the question of what issues are important to you and other young voters? And you all can go in whichever order you prefer.
All right, I guess we're going ladies first. So I'm going to be speaking from a perspective not just of my own, but also involving millennials, because I'm part of the millennial generation. And when millennials came into higher education, our parents put a strong emphasis on higher education being a doorway that's going to lead to all of these opportunities in our future. However, when most of us came out of college, we ended up with intense student loan debt and in a job crisis where there weren't positions available for people with degrees because degrees became so common. So I think that for this voting cycle and this election cycle, we're going to see a lot of emphasis from the younger generations on student loan reform. How are we going to protect the interest rate so that it isn't a form of predatory lending? How are we going to make sure that people retain access to higher education? And then how are we going to make sure that those degrees retain their value?
I'll take it next. I think I'm also going to try to answer this question as generally as possible because as a young person who's very interested in politics, I think I have a unique view on what I find important about politics. But young people in general, I think they're disillusioned by a political system that they see as corrupt, that they see as unresponsive to their needs and to their everyday reality. But some of the issues that I know that they find important are abortion. That's been mobilizing young voters in the last midterm, and this election will mobilize voters again. Climate change they find very important, and also student loan debt reform, which I just mentioned.
Hello, everyone. I think Dino said it best to kind of keep it general. As a young person that's very involved in politics, and I'm paying attention to a lot of things I don't think a lot of other people my age are. But I know me personally, I'm very focused on the economy. I'm 21 years old. I'm about to buy a house, and I'm graduating from college. I'm looking at trying to buy a house, and I know that's something that's not feasible for me because of the way the house is running right now. I'm also looking at education.
being a bit disappointed in the political system and believing that it is corrupt. And so in that, are there specific issues or barriers that discourage young voters from voting and participating in the process?
I think one of the biggest things is the knowledge barrier. We are in a society where we don't really teach students how government works, what different positions of government do. If you ask most people, not just young people, but most people who their congressperson is, their senator is, they can't tell you their names. They certainly can't tell you their responsibilities. And that's not really on them. That's more on our society for not really emphasizing civics education at a young age, not emphasizing the importance of exercising your right to vote. And I think another barrier on top of the knowledge barrier is the disillusionment. Like, if you don't believe, like I talk to so many people, it's like, nothing's gonna change no matter who I vote for. So, if you don't believe that the act of voting is gonna result in anything happening, then you're gonna be less likely to vote.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, I think Nino makes some point about how civics is not really taught in schools. I know me personally, I had a history class we spent maybe a week on civics. At the same high school, I think we spent 2 weeks. It wasn't until I had more conversations with people that I became learning about like how government functions and what actually is the role of politics. Something I think that a lot of people don't really consider when they say, oh, my vote doesn't matter, or they got me lost in the grand scheme of things, is that everything is political. One thing that I did when I worked for a nonpartisan organization, registering people to vote, I would say the names some people care about. Some people talk about their cars or fashion or even getting their license, and I was like, that is all politics. People are making decisions on your behalf. When you vote, you have the power to choose a representative that chooses your best interests in their lives.
And just to add in one more thought, I think you guys really covered civics in school, but I think we also need to address the role of parents in educating their children on the importance of voting. Take your kids to the polls so that they can see you be excited to vote, so that they see you setting the example, exercising your right to vote. Instead of talking about how all politicians are bought out by lobbyist organizations, focus on what grassroots organizations can do to enhance their positions. Focus on what an individual person can do and why that vote is so important, what that vote shows to politicians. That even if your candidate does not win the election, your vote shows what you think is important. And so for parents, explaining to your kids the important aspects, the conversations that we're having tonight, touching back on those so that they can see it. And when I say children, I don't just mean your little kids. I mean parents. Check in with your college-age kids. Are they going to vote? And everybody check in with your friends. Are they going to vote? Express to them how important it is, because when we see those around us and those who look like us voting, we're going to be more likely to go out and vote.
I think she's just
about barriers to voting or civic engagement. I think an important barrier that we don't talk about a lot or that doesn't get attention is when we're having conversations, or is it a conversation of sharing knowledge, or is it a conversation of me trying to convince you of my beliefs? Am I trying to push my morals, my philosophy of the candidate I want to see power? Or am I challenging you to actually reason yourself? Am I giving you the tools to learn, or am I asking you to subscribe to my doctrine?
Wonderful, and you are powerful young minds that I'm extremely excited to be coming into the community and making impact. And I think that all of you hit on how young voters are starting to feel as though it doesn't really matter if they vote or not, because their vote isn't going to decide the win or the election, or their
So you want me to go ahead and get over there now?
And so in that point, how do you think we motivate the younger generation to maximize their vote no matter if they believe their candidate is going to win?
Well, I guess I'll take it away. We have a presidential election coming up in 2 weeks. Everybody knows. Everybody has heard. Everybody knows that your president is the head of the executive branch. What people don't seem to get, or they are struggling to grasp, is that the president does not hold all of the power. It is your legislators, and not just your federal senators and your federal congresspeople, but your state senators and your state congresspeople. Especially when we look at Roe v. Wade being overturned and sent back to the states, it is your state legislation that's deciding those laws that are actively impacting your life. So I love the fact that we do publicize a presidential election so much, and we push that people get out and vote. But I think the real emphasis in our education of the younger generation needs to be on the importance of those more minor elections, the ones that aren't considered a holiday that you get off work. So when we start to talk about that, if you go out and you vote for your state congressperson, that you have a potential for a bigger impact, you have a potential to see those changes in your life almost immediately. And so it's really important that we push those elections, not just the presidential election.
Just to follow up on that, everything is political. The way you drive to work, one road might have more potholes, more traffic, gas prices, even the prices of groceries or rent. Like, everything is political, and it can be tied back to the legislators that we put in office. Legislators that are supposed to work for we, the people. And I think that's the best way of getting younger people involved. Because again, I think education has done the greatest job of explaining or even showing those links of like these are people in power that we put there, and they make decisions for us that impact us. And now I need convenience because I have to work even harder now because of these things that they haven't solved that are the non-interests. So we're talking about getting people to register to vote. I think that's the conversation that we will be having. Like, what directly matters to you, and this is who's in government, this is who's in power that can actually solve the issues that matter to people.
I think just to, first on the second thing that Alexa said, that Denver said, and also to add, we have to be more, those of us who are already voting, those of us who are already politically active, we have to be more engaged citizens, because voting is not the only responsibility or right that we have as a citizen. We also have a responsibility to make sure that the people that we put in power are doing the things that they said that they were going to do, are actually representing our interests when they go into these places. These are the things that will, I'll give stories to kind of give an example of how that can work, like practically. So I was an intern for a state senator a couple of years ago, and this state senator is a Republican. He got calls and emails every day from his constituents saying, this is what I want you to do. This is how I want you to vote on this. And these are not like big bills, like obviously there's your big bills, but there's a bill or another bill on some niche issue. And they're emailing them, they're calling them, telling them, this is how I want you to vote. This is how I want you to represent my interests. This is what I think about this. And if we start doing this more and more as a community, as a people, then the politicians in our country, in our state, in our city, they will start to realize that we are engaged citizens, and things will start to change. And then once things start to change, the people in our community will see that voting does matter. It matters that you're an engaged citizen. So just creating that change and making it actually where, not just telling people, yes, your vote matters because of the numbers of it, but your vote matters because you can see structural change where you live.
And you all have done a phenomenal job explaining why your vote matters and the importance of voting. So now let's get into what are you looking for in your political candidates? So those that are running for office, no matter if it's local, state, or at the national level, what type of characteristics would you like to see in those that would earn your vote?
Just to speak on, I'm the first on the local level. I would like to see somebody engaging the community. I remember a few years back when Charles Booker was on his first campaign. I saw him at Louisville Pride. He marched in the parade. I saw him at the grocery store that I go to. I would like to see someone who is in the community and they're trying to represent, someone that has strong ties to the community. I also am looking for a bit of authenticity, like honesty. Like when I speak to them, are they speaking to me as a person? Are they taking the time to hear my concerns, or are they angry? Are they campaigning? I don't think anybody really likes to be talked at. I think people want to genuinely be heard, to be seen, and when politicians actually take the time to show that they care, I think that's the best thing they can do. Even, I know I go to the University of Louisville, a lot of good organizations invite politicians all the time to come to campus to talk to students. It always really speaks to me in my heart when I see someone taking the time to actually talk to young people or talk to older members of the community.
I'm not gonna lie, I forgot the question. Can you repeat it?
Absolutely. What do you look for in candidates running for office at the local, state, or national level?
I like to look for people who represent the interests of the people who represent the interests of the people who put them in power. So even if it's somebody who I disagree with when it comes to their policies or their values, if they're doing their job, regardless of what their policies and their values are, is to represent and put them in power. So I look for people who are black. When it comes to black candidates, I hold to a higher standard to represent our interests. That's pretty much it. Like, I feel like that's their job, is to represent the interests of the people. And if they're not doing that, then we should be looking to get them out of office, not continually putting them in office.
I really love what Edler said about local government, finding somebody who is actively participating in the local community. Not just before they're elected, but also after they're elected. Just because we put you in office doesn't mean you can disappear behind a desk. We still want to see you out. We still want to see you talking to the people who got you here. I also love what Nino said about a candidate making sure that they are voting on what the people who put them into power care about and in that direction. You may feel one specific way as an individual, but when you are put into a position of power in politics, you are a representative. And now it is your job to represent your whole constituency, whether or not you individually agree with them. And I think that that's where some of our political candidates do a good job by like prosecutors who sometimes have to prosecute cases that they personally don't believe in, whereas some other candidates don't particularly do such a good job. I'm going to speak to the federal level. So as we're approaching our presidential election, the biggest thing that I'm going to be looking for in a candidate is your track record. I want to see that the words that you're saying now match the way that you voted in the past, align with the groups that you've aligned with, and then I want to see that even if you are not able to win, you still fight. So, for example, with the Biden administration, President Joe Biden made a lot of promises regarding student loan debt. Unfortunately, due to courts and legislation and litigation, he was unable to come through on all of those promises that he made. However, we've seen them consistently pushing different ways to help solve the student loan issue. And so even though they haven't been fully successful, I didn't get $20,000 off my student loans, which would have been amazing. But seeing that they have continued to fight for people who are in need and they are trying to fulfill those promises is what I find most important, because that gives me hope and faith in your actions in the future.
I have one thing to add to what I said. I basically said that representation is their only job. That was incorrect. I think their job is twofold. It's representation and statesmanship. So representation includes representing the interests of the people who put you in power. Statesmanship is basically using that power to make sure that the worst instincts of those people don't become the law of the land. So I just want to put that in there. Representation and statesmanship.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you one final question. Do you feel personally that your vote makes a difference? And can you explain to the younger voters why or why not?
I guess as the older voter, I will go first, to hopefully explain to everybody. My vote matters. Whoever becomes president, whether the candidate that I vote for wins or loses, the vote that I cast on November the 5th is important, and it does matter. And the reason it matters is because it shows all of the American populace, it shows all of the people in politics what Americans care about. It also shows all of the other countries across the world what Americans stand for. So when we vote for a candidate, and maybe they don't make it in, but maybe that race is really, really close. It shows that the American populace can at the same time stand for multiple different issues, and that we understand that in our political environment and in the atmosphere that we have, sometimes, even though we don't win, we have to take it on the chin, like the grown-ups that we are, and we still continue pushing forward. So my vote may not get the presidential candidate that I would like into the office, but it could show that I really care about the housing crisis, about the job crisis, about student loan crisis, about abortion rights, about wars and conflicts that are going on. It shows the stance and the things that I find important. And that is going to influence not just other people to become engaged and active, but it's going to influence our politicians on the decisions that they make, and then it's going to influence American policy across the globe. And for those reasons, my vote is extremely important.
I think Alexis said it perfectly. Voting is definitely a way to have some issues and concerns, have a platform to stand on. But I don't think of it just as voting. I think voting is demanding to be heard, and I will be heard, and I believe that. My family immigrated here from Haiti. It's a small island in the Caribbean about 22 years ago. They've been in this country for 22 years, and they still cannot. My eldest sister came here when she was 6 months old. She is now 20. She's now 23. She's gonna do it. She still cannot. Family 5, 2 of us live. My entire life, I had to hear my parents watch the local news, watch national news, talking about all these decisions being made for them. They couldn't vote. They felt unsafe to even comment on issues because of the fear of retaliation. I don't think it would do them justice. I don't think it would do my due diligence if I did not vote. If I didn't demand my voice to be heard. In this country, Black and brown people have fought to have the right to vote. They have died to have the right to vote. I'm not just voting for me. I'm not just voting for my family. I am voting for the betterment of my community, and I am voting for the betterment of my children and my children's children. That's what we need to think about when voting. It's not just slipping a piece of paper in a box. This is deciding the fate of our future.
Your vote matters. Your vote matters, as it's been said, because it affects the policy of our country, our state or a city. Your vote matters because our people have died to get the right of it, to get the right to vote. You're voting not only for yourself, but you're voting for those 4 little girls who got bumped in that church in Birmingham. You're voting for your grandmama or your granddaddy who went out there in March and got bit by police dogs, got sprayed by fire hoses. You're voting for them. They did not die for that right to vote just for us to vote unintelligently. So we also have to remember that in certain ways our vote doesn't matter. In the last, I believe, since 2003, 2 or 3, the presidential elections were not determined by the popular vote at all. The person who won the popular vote lost the election. So in a way, your vote does not matter. Your vote does not matter if you go into a ballot box and you look at the party beside a person's name, and that's what determines who you're voting for. Your vote does not matter then. So your vote also does not matter when we as people, black people, vote individually. Our vote matters when we vote as a collective. We are a minority in this country, but we are a very strong minority. Understand this, 90% of black votes have gone to the Democratic candidate since like 1960. One candidate, the Democratic candidate that's up right now, is losing, I think, 20% of black men. So instead of 90%, it's going to be like 70%, at least according to the polls. And that right there might determine the outcome of the election. That's the power of our vote. If we know how to pull it, if we have an agenda behind it, if we know how to pull it, and if we hold the people accountable, when we put in power to do things for us, and if they don't do those things, don't vote for them again. You have to vote intelligently, or no, our vote does not matter. And that's what all the boys in the hood are saying. They don't know how to put the political science behind it, but they know it doesn't matter when we're not doing it in that way. And until we're able to communicate to them that we're going to do it in that way, we're going to have an agenda behind it that affects their everyday life, they're not going to vote. They're just not going to do it. So, yes, our vote matters, but with some stipulations.
Okay. Before you all do it, all I'm gonna do is we're gonna do a little vote check, fact check. Your vote always matters. Your vote always matters. Obama lost 8% of black men when he ran. It is projected that Harris is behind 12% of black men, maybe 12 to 14%. I think it's important for us to talk about that. And one of the things that we should talk about tonight is some of why that is. I also want to make sure we do some myth busters here. Again, not here to tell you who to vote for, but I want to be clear about some of the things that we've heard about one candidate's record as it relates to some of the things that young black men are saying about why they don't want to necessarily vote in this election. And so one of those things is, wait a minute, before you all leave, hold on one second, I'll tell you. Let me stop myself. The University of Louisville, University of Kentucky, and so many universities in our state are under attack. And I want to say to any elected official who is watching this tonight, and you see these 3 people, and you think about the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion that are happening. I sat in the room 2 to 3 weeks ago with legislators who were questioning our university presidents and asking them how they would dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you could listen to these 3 people and think that anything at the University of Louisville related to inclusion and equity and black people should be dismantled, you have a serious problem, and I hope we vote you out. And I'm going to go ahead and ask the next panel to come on up and sit in the seats where you are assigned. And while we're doing that, as they transition, I do want to say one of the things that we have often heard about the Vice President Harris, is that she was a prosecutor, and therefore, there are a lot of, she put people in prison. That's what prosecutors do. We often talk about in our community that we need diversity in every space. We want elected officials, we want black mayors, we want black prosecutors, black police, we want all of these things. But when people get those roles, we want them also to do the job. And what we should remember is that when she was in office as district attorney's office, she created a program around reducing recidivism and increasing people's ability to re-enter into their communities. Also, we've heard her referred to as a cop, saying how much she loved being a cop and all these things. What we don't hear about, we don't see, and we don't read about is that when she was a DA, the police department actually stood up and physically turned their backs on her because she refused to seek the death penalty in a case where a police officer was killed. And in fact, even some Democrats critiqued her for that. So I appreciate every critique of everybody running for office, and there should be plenty. But what we have to do is make sure that when we say something, we got it right, because people are listening to us. And we have two very different alternatives here in this election. So please go, do whatever you must do, but let it be based on accurate information. Okay? Now, other announcements before we move on. There are free rides to the election, to the polls, so you can get to wherever. I guess at Vegas, we're gonna have folks doing souls to the polls on election day. So please do that. Election day plan, please make sure you look at the sample ballot, that you know who you're voting for. You've got an idea, you've read the citizen guides, and you know about the candidates. Fill it out, take it in with you. It's not against the rules. You can take yours in there with you and vote how you want to vote. Make sure you know your polling location. I have certainly gone to some of the locations, you can barely find them. They're hidden grass, there's dogs somewhere. If you see that, report it, tell somebody about it. Make sure you do what you need to do. Make sure you know the dates. And also, little early young professionals, if you want to join, and you should. Please get involved, get engaged. They would love to have you. While we are doing this tonight, you will see the QR code. Ask questions, send those questions. We're going to answer all of those questions as best we can before we leave here. And then the last thing, child care is available here tonight. You got to pick your kids up at 8, even if we go over a little bit, we just might do that. So I wanted to say those things. And then one of these young folks mentioned the elected officials being present. It would be a disservice for me not to acknowledge those who are elected officials that are in this room with us tonight. If you could please stand, that would be wonderful. Please stand, very quickly. Metro Councilwoman Paula Crane. Monica Flowers, Councilman. Josephine Buckner, District Judge. We've also got some folks who are running for office. I think it's important. Let's recognize them. Running for office. Stand up quickly, please.
Tim Finley, State Rep, District 29.
Tim Finley, State Rep, District 29. All right. Here we go. Oh, I've been waiting on this. Y'all know how much I love winning on the panel. Oh, we got a good panel here. Let me tell you. First of all, I want to tell y'all something. I want to talk about all the things you said with the original code. I want to talk about Amendment 2, Project 2025. I want to get into Amendment 1 a little bit, just to tell people don't do it. Let me give you the short. Vote no, Amendment 1 and Amendment 2. We'll get to why. I probably don't tell you. And then I also want to talk a little bit about these attacks on DEI that we see happening in Frankfurt, across the state, and really across the country. And I think that's it. So y'all can kind of work it in. But let me, first of all, recognize Dr. Justin Reed, Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, assistant professor of the Old Testament and Hebrew Bible. The brother is bad. If you don't know him, shame on you. He lives in Louisville. He is a gift to us. He is a gift to this city. Come to his Bible study class. It'll just, he's fabulous. Just being around is fabulous. Lyndon Pryor, the president of the Louisville Urban League. We know him, for all of them. And Dr. Joseph Ellison, JCPS, assistant superintendent of high school. Thank you for taking all the hits, JCPS. And then we have Donna C. Davidson, Louisville Urban League community organizer. You can wave your hand, please. strong lawyer, a strong sister. And then Felicia Newman, the queen, attorney for the Louisville Urban League, director of Federal Policy, another bad sister. So, all right, what we're going to do is start with why vote and Amendment 2, but if you all can work in some other things, go right ahead, because we need you to do that. And if you want to address anything that you just heard, you are welcome to do that as well. Matter of fact, let's start with that. Anybody want to address anything you heard with the young folks panel? Anything outstanding? Before we get into
I just want to say one thing. He said, well, I'm gonna be nice. I'm completely and utterly taken back by the intelligence, by the depth of knowledge, the depth of the conversation. I'm so proud of everybody who did what I'm not giving you no $100, but if I can see it like innocent, I might cut a check, maybe.
Add to the roll. Anybody else? Okay. So, why vote? Describe what critical race theory is and how it has shaped our current understanding of voting rights and electoral participation. And these first few questions are directed to just Dr. Reed, Linda Pryor, or Dr. Ellison, if you don't mind. So, let's talk about critical race theory, what it is, how it shaped our current understanding of voting rights and electoral participation.
Cool. So I'm gonna define critical race theory in two different ways because currently that's how it's being treated, in two very different ways. So the first way to understand it is very academic. Little background, my wife was at Harvard Law School, and while she was there were protests that her and her co-conspirators were up to, trying to get some changes going, and during those protests, there were people who they brought in to teach about critical race theory. And I'm listening to these people, and I'm like, wow, this stuff started at Harvard. But by this point, they have to bring people from outside to teach it because people have been pushing back on it for a while in different ways. What critical race theory is as an academic discipline is something that started in legal scholarship, and it started after the Civil Rights Movement. Civil Rights Movement, we get some official legal changes that seem great. We get Brown v. Board of Education to end school segregation, so that should fix some things. We get 1964 Civil Rights Act that says you can't legally discriminate on the basis of race, sex, color, national origin. That's supposed to fix things. But lawyers who are fighting for these rights to be real, to be lived out, are wondering why a decade, 2 decades later, the same or worse racial disparities still exist. And so these scholars start to say, okay, how can we understand our present moment, our past that led us to this present, and our future strategies differently from how we understood them before? Because however we were understanding before that led to the changes we made in the Civil Rights Movement didn't fix things. And so critical race theory developed as specific ideas, concepts to try to understand all that and try to have strategies that would work. There are other strategies for addressing racism that aren't critical race theory. They were responding to some of the earlier ones. That's one definition. It's technical, it's academic. The other side is what we popularly see from people who are against critical race theory. Christopher Rufo is someone who publicly has said his intention. So I have a quote from him where he, in an interview, explained what he's doing. I basically took that body of criticism, I paired it with breaking news stories that were shocking and explicit and horrifying and made it political, turned it into a salient political issue with a clear villain. In other words, he took all these fears that people have, he took all these things that are popular in the news, and he put them in a one big bag with the label critical race theory. He doesn't care how accurate that is. What he cares about is galvanizing people. And certain people and groups found this to be a good political strategy for getting voting happening. And so critical race theory in this definition is this dangerous communist ideology infecting our schools that is identical to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is anything that has to do with affirmative action, and all that is critical race theory according to this definition. And as much as someone who does this academic stuff might say, oh, that's inaccurate, you're missing all these things, that doesn't matter in terms of politics, in terms of how it's being used. So those are two different definitions. And this one, in terms of what its effect has been on voting, is that it's gotten a lot of people going, including the Heritage Foundation, who has funded, who is behind Project 2025, pumping money into grassroots organizing against critical race theory, giving people manuals on how to go against your school board and change things with a script against critical race theory. So that's one side. The academics also have something to say about how critical race theory makes a difference in terms of this voting by analyzing that history and that present moment and talking about strategies to help.
Thank you. President Parker, you want to add something? If not, we move on.
No, we can. The only thing I'm gonna say is just make sure you all understand critical race theory is not being taught to your kindergarten, first grade student. Anybody, it doesn't happen. So again, this idea of weaponizing fear in order to promote an agenda is what is happening here. But what is important is that you all understand what it is and what it is not, so that when you hear these attacks, you recognize them for what they are.
Thank you. All right. What specific historical injustices continue to impact voter access and representation today, particularly in marginalized communities?
So I'm going to speak about this one again, starting with critical race theory. Critical race theory is saying, okay, let's look back at, so remember, critical race theorists are saying what we thought was the issue and what led us to make certain solutions with the civil rights movement, maybe we should rethink these things critically. So they'll look back and say, okay, black people got the right, I'm sorry, black men got the right to vote after slavery. And then, shortly after that, after a period where the government protected people's rights, the government said, we don't really care that much, and laws started to be implemented that would disenfranchise people, take away their right to vote by convicting them, by taking them into prison for minor things that were new laws and new penalties, and also by adding rules like, okay, formerly enslaved people are allowed to vote as long as your grandfather was enslaved. Who does that count for, right? You can vote as long as you can read these documents that will give you the poll, and then they'll not hand somebody a document because they're white, and then they'll hand some black person the Magna Carta and say, can you read that? And then they'll say you did a bad job, you can't vote. So those were very blatantly racist policies, and then time changes, and you get new policies that continue to happen. When those ones are struck down, when those ones are deemed obviously racist, eventually you get new policies, and you get the erosion of old moves that were made to protect people's rights. So you get a Supreme Court that says, oh, it looks like we don't have to protect counties from this certain law that was making sure that people got their right to vote. We don't have to do that anymore because it looks like people are voting. It's like, well, you're kind of missing the point. People are voting because the law works, not because the law is unnecessary. But the Supreme Court strikes that down, and then you see voter suppression happening. The Heritage Foundation has a branch called Heritage Action that has been pushing for the implementation of more policies, more things that people have to do to be allowed to vote, in terms of what you have to show, in terms of the rules of what a polling place can do. And in 2021, they had more of
those new changes in any year of the past decade before that. And they had spent $5 million lobbying to get these changes. So they've been pumping money into getting these changes. The founder of Heritage Foundation, who Heritage actually comes from, Paul Weyrich, had a quote where he said, so there's a continuation of that history that's old, but now with new methods, right? He said, in 1980, I don't want everybody to vote. Our leverage in elections quite candidly goes up as voting populace goes down. So people with the money, pumping the money, blatantly saying, it's helpful for me if everyone doesn't vote. And then we are supposed to accept, well, he said that, but that doesn't really mean that these policies are bad. What's the mask that they put on it? The mask they put on it is that there's election fraud that needs to be combated. We need stricter policies because people are cheating all over the place. That's what they said. The Heritage Foundation has a database that they're looking at millions, actually it's billions of votes over the past 40 years, and have found 1,400 out of billions of documented cases of voter fraud. So they're really pumping up by showing specific examples that this is a big problem when historically it hasn't been.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Others want to add to that? President Pryor or Dr. Ellison want to add anything to that around historical injustices or really impact of voter access and representation?
So, I mean, simple things, like what we do now for our returning citizens, so folks who have been convicted of crimes are still disenfranchised. They have to, in many states, petition to restore their right to vote. That is oftentimes a long, hard process. Sometimes it is a costly process, if they're able to do it at all. So that is a way to keep people off of the voter rolls. Things like we saw happen in the last presidential election, there were tons of stories down in Georgia where they said you couldn't do simple things like bring people water in line. Or what we do all the time when we tell you on election day, make sure you get in line. You have to get in line and be in line before the polls close, right? Those are all sorts of small but very significant types of policies that are impacting whether or not people can vote, because they will literally cut you off. Even if you were sitting there in your car, air conditioning, side lines too long, no, you were not in line. You cannot vote if the time is reached, right? So those are things that are done to discourage people from voting and to make it more difficult. ID laws or another thing. I know a lot of people say like, well, everybody, an ID law doesn't seem terribly unreasonable. But for those of you who may be seniors or who are taking care of elders, and that driver's license expires, how hard is that to go get? Right? Like it is difficult. It is not an easy thing. So we're disenfranchising people along all sorts of lines. When again, to the doctor's point, we have had minimal at best, and minimal is being generous when we talk about actual election fraud that's ever happened in this country.
I would just also chime in and echo what our youth member said, in that your vote is your voice. And so if you are not voting or the system remains in place to make it more difficult for you to vote, you cannot get people in place who believe what you believe, speak what you speak, and want done what you want done. And so when we think, especially at the state level right now, as we mimic legislation from other places like Florida, especially with education, it's not what we believe is right for our students or our school systems, but because we struggle or we see voting as a burden rather than our voice, we don't go, we don't exercise the right, we don't get the right people in place, and then things happen that we end up complaining about and can't flip it because it's now codified. And so we have to remember that, everyone who fought through the barriers and the struggles to vote historically, and those that presently exist, the foolishness that presently exists, there is still our voice in our vote. And we have to be committed to getting our voice heard by voting actively in every election, state, local, federal.
Absolutely. Another thing I'd like to raise is that in places like Oregon, you can mail your vote. I have friends who have not been into a voting booth in years. They get the ballot in the mail, they off, and then they mail it in. But there are things that you can do to help people be able to vote, because we know that the more people that vote, the better our democracy, the stronger the democracy. So we are not interested in suppressing votes, but really instead making sure that everybody has a voice in our country. What are the key concerns regarding Amendment 2, and how might it impact the future of education in Kentucky?
All right, this is where I chime in. Hi, y'all. I can't follow Dr. Reed. I'll just quote. I don't have no quotes, Justin. So Amendment 2, here's the thing. Amendment 2 is currently being espoused as a school choice law, or a school choice amendment, rather, and that's a lie. I'm just telling you right now, it's bogus. It is a voucher law at its face value, but it doesn't immediately send money anywhere. What it does is amend the state constitution to give the legislature the ability to pass additional legislation in a very wide open way. So they're able then to fund the charter law that they passed in 2017. If you notice, it passed. But how many charters do you see? You don't, because somebody's got to fund it. So this amendment opens the floodgates to pass additional laws that will then dole out funds. So that's the first thing you need to know. It's not about school choice. It doesn't mean, on November 6th, people can wake up and decide, I got this blank check to go to this private or public school. It doesn't work that way. What it would do, in essence, is begin to shift funds away from our public schools by amending the state constitution to say that public funds could be used for schools other than quote-unquote common schools. When you read the state constitution about public education, it talks about common schools. Those are our standard public K-12 schools. So in essence, it will amend the state constitution to say your public dollars can be funneled away from your public schools to fund education in other ways. Here's the reality. We start doling out vouchers. Say it's a $4,000 voucher, and it costs $4,000 to go to this private school. Well, that private school's going to realize that you got a $4,000 check, but they don't want you. So they're going to raise their tuition to $8,000, $12,000, $20,000. I'm not going to name them. And still want to take your $4,000 and tell you to come up with the difference that you don't have, which means you can't go. So it doesn't change those dynamics as far as our ability to get into those 500 parochial schools. One other thing I'll say real quick is that you see this bogus commercial talking about, yes, on Amendment 2 means increased teacher salaries and more resources in schools. Help me understand. I was an English major. I didn't major in math. But help me understand how you take money away and that equals an increase.
Come on, what?
So we can actively divert funds from public education, continue to blame public education for the ills that we face, when we currently don't fully support it and fund it, and then claim on the backside somehow it's going to mean higher salaries, more resources, and the like. Students with disabilities, students from minority populations, students who are multilingual learners are not going to have a choice. And what will happen is we will end up with fewer funds at the public school level to support the neediest kids who need the most money.
90% of black kids in JCP, or in Jefferson County, attend JCPS schools. 90% attend public schools. So this is going to directly impact our kids, our babies. Dr. Ellison is absolutely correct. And the one thing that I will really know is the amendment that he's writing, and all the amendment does is allow the state to divert money away from education. The amendment does not actually force them to spend it in educational ways. So we assume that they are going to enroll vouchers in charter schools, but the reality is, the amendment says they can spend that money however they decide they want to spend it. And so that is something to be very, very concerned about, is that you are essentially giving them a blank check with your educational dollars to do whatever they want. Now, to the point that, yes, they probably will follow the track of other states and try to invoke vouchers and other sorts of things. And again, what you said about choice, the choice is not for students and parents, it is for these schools who are going to receive this money. Because even if you happen to have every nickel of the tuition, they don't have to take you. And if they decide to take you, they can send you home at whatever time they want. They can expel your child without question or consequence at any point in time and keep every dime that they have collected from you. And so this is not an amendment for families, for students. This is not about fixing public schools. This is not about better education. This is not about better outcomes. This is a subsidy for the wealthy. Because time over time, what we've seen in voucher states, the people who are most often using the vouchers to go to private schools are kids who are already in private schools before the voucher ever comes. They are the ones who are going to receive the benefit because they will use it essentially as a small discount on the tuition they've already been paying. While your child is still sitting in the same seats with less funding, less resources, fewer educators to do the job. And so we have to be really, really aware of what this means and don't be fooled by the rhetoric and quite frankly the lies. There was a mailer that went out that said, spoke to just what I else said to, oh, it's going to be better for public schools, and the teachers are going to get increase, all sorts of stuff. They're lying in your faces. And you need to understand that these are not things that are going to happen for our kids. This will be incredibly detrimental to the future of public education, which means it will be incredibly detrimental to the future of our society. Because if you, like me, believe that public education is not only a right, but also important for the public good, then you understand by having less educated people in society, ultimately, is going to be bad for everybody. It is a terrible thing. And one thing that we have to talk about with this is really in all of these things, whether it be the anti-CRT work that's going on, these voucher amendments, or a whole banning books, a whole host of other things, is there's been for a long time, I think Dr. Reed hinted at this, a really strong wave of anti-intellectualism in our country. And that should not be a surprise because those of you who look like me understand at one point we weren't allowed to read. And so there's a reason why they do not want us and they do not want society at large to be aware and informed and educated. And we should be concerned about that. All of these things feed into a larger agenda to keep people dumb and uninformed. And that includes our students. And so we have to fight vigorously to ensure that they are going to get everything that they deserve, everything that is owed to them. Because not only do they deserve it, we as a country and as a great society deserve it.
All right.
To humanize this idea that Lyndon said about a student going in a voucher setting and then being removed, right? So public schools are governed on expectations from the state. So when you look at state accountability, when you look at behavior, actions, and incidences and responses, all of that is, trust me, we are eagle-eyed by the state all day long. But a private school, a charter school, they don't have those types of restrictions on them. So they don't have to tell you how well they perform or don't perform. We do, right? They don't have to accept your child. We do. And they don't have to keep your child. We do. And so if they take your child and then dismiss your child is now in interrupted education. And they're going to be further behind. We've been talking about the impact of COVID since we've come out of it. And the fact that our kids are so far behind and we're working diligently to catch them up. But if a kid is in and out of various school placements, they're going to be further behind. The other thing I'll say on funding, about 88% of our state budget General fund budget is focused on education, on human services, on health, on criminal justice. 88% of our general fund. So to Linda's point, if they open up the Constitution and can decide where to put the money, and they're not going to put it in education, where do you think they are going to put it? Because the minute we are dumb, ignorant, and uninformed, they will make sure we have 3 hots, a cot, and a small little room to sit in, because they'll take those funds and divert them that way. So we have to know that 88% of our current general fund feeds not just education, but mental health supports, general health supports for our kids. And if we don't stand up for what is right and stand against this amendment, that money can go sideways.
All right. So, it sounds like Amendment 2 is a problem for our community. Does it sound like that? I'm just trying to say, yes? So we're voting no. Right. If you want to. We'll tell you how to vote. They're not voting for Amendment 2, and they seem pretty informed. Can we get a second to talk about Amendment 1? Can anybody take that on for me real quick? I'm just gonna say, I'll just tell you what I know, right? I know it's a no. And I know that it's about adding language to the Kentucky's Constitution that bans non-citizens. And I just heard this young brother say, I am from Haiti. I have family members from Haiti. He said in a family of 5, there are 2 of us who are allowed to vote. So this is something that is already banned. So why are we talking about Amendment 1? Are we just trying to scare people? Is that what this is about?
Yes, ultimately it is another fear tactic, because you've heard a lot of this rhetoric out in campaigns already. One side is saying like, oh, all of these people who are non-citizens have been voting and all this, but one that never happened again, they're lying in your face. Make sure you understand that, because we need to call a thing a thing. A lie is a lie. They are lying in your faces about these things. But things like Amendment 1 are, to this point, absolutely redundant. Non-citizens already can't vote. They can't vote in any place, not in any state. There's absolutely no need for this. And so this is the type of rhetoric that is used to reinforce this idea that we have a problem with non-citizens voting. And that does a few different things, but one of the major things it does is it begins to create more discord. So now, in a city particularly like Louisville, where we have a large immigrant population here, how does that now make those immigrants feel? How does it now make citizens feel towards those immigrants, right? Like it begins to breed this distrust here. It begins to drive wedges between communities that quite frankly have a whole lot in common. And so that is huge. But also, once language like this gets on the books, so again, this is a constitutional amendment, once you start to put this on there, if it passes, should other things come behind it that start to reinforce it, this allows them to widen the gap between what it allows and what constitutes the right to be able to vote. And so we don't need this. This is an unnecessary redundant bill, but more than anything, it is something that is sowing the seeds of discord within marginalized community, and that is simply not acceptable.
All right, very good. I'm going to say one of the questions that is really about education, community advocacy. I'm going to come back to everybody for that one. So now I'm going to switch. If nobody cares, I'd like to switch over to talk about Project 2025. And before we start with questions about it, I happen to have a list. I'm currently employed by Perception Institute. If you look at the videos that we showed before this event started, there were some commercials, one with Malik Yoba, another with Tamika Mallory, another with my son, the General, former rapper. And those are PSAs that we are making to help make sure that people are engaged, civic engagement. We need people to vote. Again, it's not our business to tell you to vote for, but we absolutely want to make sure that not only are you voting, but you're giving somebody else a ride, you're calling other people. So on this Project 2025, our founder, her mom, happened to do a whole bunch of research, and she gave us the authors of Project 2025. There are many, many authors, but I just want to tell you the roles they had in the previous administration. So I think it's important because a lot of people say, oh, Project 2025 belongs to, I think I heard people say President Trump. Well, it didn't. He said it didn't. He said he's not involved. But here's who is involved. His former chief of staff at the Office of Personnel Management, the White House Assistant Special Counsel in the administration, acting Assistant Secretary for Policy in the Department of Labor, Deputy Associate Attorney General, Chief of Staff to the Director of National Intelligence, FCC Commissioner, HUD Secretary, Associate Director of Presidential Personnel, the Acting Deputy Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, the Deputy Chief of Staff to the President himself. Again, all of these folks, there are probably about 20 more people, all were affiliated with the former administration, the administration that was in place when we had that horrible attempt at safe and secure exchange of power and everything kind of went wrong on January 6th. They're the people who have helped to author Project 2025, just so we're clear. So the question is, how does Project 2025 plan to shift or reverse policies impacting pressing issues?
Anybody else back there?
Think about criminal justice,
And my neck.
women's rights, LGBTQIA voices, climate, justice, DEI, public service support. Just talk to us about what does Project 2025 talk about doing, or shifting any of those areas, and we can start. Go ahead, Felicia.
Well, I want to piggyback on something you said because I want people to understand. The Heritage Foundation wrote this policy called Project 2025. But what people don't know is they write this same thing every 4 years. And not this particular policy plan, but a policy prescription plan for what they would like the president to do. Okay? So when they wrote their manifesto in 2020, Trump was, 2016, and the president got elected, President Trump got elected, he enacted 60% of what was in that policy prescription. Okay? 60% of the recommendations in that policy prescription they wrote in 2016, he implemented during his time in office. So whether he says he's a part of it or not, past his prologue, so we know that he in the past has taken the recommendations and implemented. There's nothing to say that he won't do that again. Okay? So I know a lot of people have heard about Project 2025, and I'll give an overview, very brief overview. It's a policy document that is meant to radically change the United States of America. It is not ways to make America better. It's a way to make America different. Okay? Different, not better or worse in policy. We can argue about tax policy or what is better, this kind of tax credit or that type of tax credit. It is a policy prescription that says we want to have a national abortion ban. We want to ban overtime pay. We want to make it impossible to form a union. We want to monitor women's menstrual cycles. We want to make sure that it's harder to vote. It's a radical shift in what America is supposed to do. It's about taking our democracy away at the ballot box and making us an authoritarian government, where there's one person and his minions to make decisions for the rest of us. Whether we agree with the decisions is not important. Whether it's better for all is not important. It's not about the common good. It's about what a few people, usually the powerful and the connected, want for their policy prescriptions. And I would call it a billionaire's playbook, right? So they want to make sure that the billionaire class and the multi-billionaire class can basically use the government as a way to further their business interests all over the world.
My name is Felicia. So yeah, Project 2025 is probably one of the most divisive documents I've ever had the chance of reading through. And I got notes because Project 2025 is over 900 pages. And they say if you don't want a black man to know something, put it in a book. So, I brought a couple of points that I felt would be super important, but back to what Ms. Felicia said also, aside from all of that, they're also talking about enforcing the death penalty, which is a problem because we all know that a disproportionate number of black men sit on death row. Project 2025 literally states, enforce the death penalty where appropriate, applicable. The next conservative administration should therefore do everything possible to obtain finality for the 44 prisoners on death row. It should also pursue the death penalty for applicable crimes, particularly heinous crimes, involved with violence and sexual abuse of children until Congress says otherwise. When I did research on Project 2025, everything that I wrote, it felt unreal. But this is our real life. This is really what's at stake. It is outrageous, egregious, it is unfair, but please do your research.
So I assume I was invited on panel to give really the criminal justice perspective. And guys, I don't know if you read that whole 900 pages, but I was gonna say you all are blessed. I read through all of the Department of Justice and all the changes that are there. I think that going off of what Felicia said earlier, one of the biggest points about what this document does is it enlarges the power of the executive branch. So it makes sure that in positions that are supposed to be nonpartisan, so people that are career civil service workers, that they're working their entire careers, 30 years, through many administrations, different political parties. What they are saying, and they actually have as part of this document a list of people who are approved to go in and take the jobs of people that have been career civil servants and instead put them with people who are specifically political appointees. So not in the highest positions like Attorney General, we know those are normal political appointees. No, just rank and file people that work in all of these departments. So that whether or not a conservative or a liberal president is in office, conservatives can continue to actually affect policies. So while the conservative president is in office, they will only pursue interests aligned with the president. Whether or not that is in line with justice, the rule of law, it's going by what the president wants. And then, if say that conservative president is voted out of office, they remain in those positions and then work in order to dismantle whatever that new president, the new progressive president that they want to be able to do. So that is very scary. That's going to say that they're turning this into a dictatorship by putting into putting into office political cronies. So that we should all be very afraid of. In terms of specifically criminal legal reform, I would say I'm an abolitionist. I know I'm from the West Coast. I'm a little bit leftist, but I think there are things that everyone should be afraid of in what the plans are, particularly Black people and people who are Black people. Because we know that the criminal legal system was really designed in order to keep us incarcerated. And we still see that. I work as a public defender in this city and see every day the disparities in who my clients are and the outcomes that they receive in court. So I will say there's, Dynasty mentioned the death penalty, and she mentioned that we should care about death penalty because we know that Black people are more likely to be killed, to be given the death penalty, be sentenced to the death penalty, and be killed. And we also know that we have a history of wrongful convictions in this country. And we, just a few weeks ago, it's coming through my feeds all the time, someone was being killed, when there have been people that came back and said, hey, we believe he's innocent, we have the evidence, the family did not want him to be killed, and yet he was still killed. Yes, the victim's family said that we did not want him to be killed. So what they're saying is, bring finality to the 44 people. They may kill 44 people in 4 years. We have had very few federal executions in the last 30 years, but they want to do 44 executions in 4 years. I will say that the United States is one of just a couple of democratic nations that actually still even impose the death penalty. They also want to allow, one is just prosecute, incarcerate. We know that incarcerating people doing maximum sentences does not actually improve, it does not deter crime. It just does not. There's this sense that if we don't put people in jail, then they're just going to continue to ravage our cities. And I know Louisville, I hear this every day, when we're going through, we're dealing with gun violence every day. I don't know if it's just me, but I think how do we deal with gun violence? We enact gun control laws that make sure that we're not free flow and what really works in terms of criminal justice reform and deterring crime is putting money, instead of the 88% that's going into to jails and police departments, why don't we invest in education? Why don't we invest in health care? Why don't we invest in making sure that people have access to wages that are living wages that they can live on? Why don't we make sure that people have places that they can give their kids so they can, or send their kids to daycare so they can work? Those are what we know actually deter crime. But this calls for no. Instead, we are simply going to incarcerate people. And if local officials do not follow through with strict incarceration laws, we are going to come and prosecute them. That is what it actually says. So where warrants and improper under federal law, they want the Department of Justice to initiate legal action against local officials, including district attorneys, who deny American citizens the equal protection laws by refusing to prosecute criminal offenses in their jurisdictions. So what should be state and local decisions they are taking from us and saying then that the federal government can come in and actually prosecute people who don't do what they want them to. Again, sign for dictatorship.
And thank you for the powerful answers. And let me also say these things can be found in Project 2025. Defund public schools, mandate privatizing schools, impacting student loans, no more canceling student debt, no student loan forgiveness, immigration laws, reinstate anti-immigration laws. And that's only going to be for some people, right? It's not going to be for every country. It's just going to we know how that works. Project 2025 mandates reinstating anti-immigration laws, energy and the environment. Current goals of the Department of Energy, mandating forgetting clean energy, expanding nuclear weapons, mandating denying climate change. And so these are things impacting Social Security. They're talking about impacting Social Security, changing the workday, the length of the workday, how long folks are allowed to work, the age rather, raising the retirement age to 69 or 70 for Americans. That would cut Social Security benefits for about 257 million people, so they would have to be forced to work longer. I don't know about you all, I'm 30, and my knees hurt already. Like, just think about, these are the kinds of very important things that Project 2025 is talking about, plus all of the things that you've heard from the folks on the stage. Think about prescription drugs, those kinds of things. Think about what we really have at stake in this election when you go into those polls. Anybody go ahead?
I was just going to say, This is kind of like their wish list, this conservative wish list of everything that they ever wanted to do to the rest of us. And if you live in a state, I'm gonna pick on a state, and I can pick on it because my father's from there. Mississippi, let's pick on this state. Mississippi has about 37% African Americans. Hardly any of them vote. Hardly any of them get welfare. That's why it's one of the poorest states in the union. Their governor does not accept welfare dollars, or if you try to get welfare dollars, it is very, very, very hard to get them. So people are starving. Okay? They have some of the worst health outcomes, education outcomes. There's tons of people incarcerated. That's what they want for the rest of us. That's what they want for the rest of us. Okay? They want us to live like we live there. They want us to be starving, unhealthy, uneducated. They want us to be begging for health care and incarcerated enough so we can be on, in the 13th Amendment, we can return to slavery. Right? So we can work in the fields for free, we can work at McDonald's for free, we can work and put up the same bags for all the hurricanes for free, because we're incarcerated. America is addicted to free labor and financial slavery and physical slavery. And that's what built the country, 400 years, and here we are, the pinnacle country in the world. And that's what they want to continue. And that's what these policy prescriptions, even though they may seem race neutral, that's what the attempt is. And that's how serious it is. That's how serious it is. They are trying to change all of our lives back to a time where they feel like they were in control. Everyone was in their place. Women, minorities, immigrants, whoever. Everybody knew their place, and there was this mediocre person at the top. Okay? So that's why it's so serious. That's why it's so important for you to understand exactly what it is. And know that he implemented 60% last time. What's he going to do this time?
I want to talk about something that you all weren't necessarily prepared to talk about, but I'd love to hear from you on it, and I need short answers because we're running out of time. I want to start with Dr. Reed, actually. I want to talk about this theory of black men deciding, this is what we're hearing, right? Maybe not to vote or how they're voting. I'm just curious what you think about all the conversation around black men in this election. Short answers, everybody. I got lots of questions to wrap up. Go ahead.
So a short answer to this, coming from the perspective of critical race theory, is to think about the intersection between different forms of identity that made certain people more vulnerable to types of oppression, and how black men who are not being oppressed on the basis of gender are being convinced that we have a different agenda from black women. That's the appeal, to try to get black men to align with masculine ideas, the powerful male candidate. That's the splitting up that people are appealing to. So we do that.
Here's a short answer. As my president and CEO, Lil Burton, said, they lying to your face. Because black men there's a percentage of black men who always voted not Democratic, right? There's always been and always been a little more of them, black men, that vote Republican, when we switch the party, right? Than women, than black women. It's a lie. I know plenty of black men who are want to vote Democratic. They want to divide us. That's all it's about. They want to divide us and put out a narrative that we are not on the same team when 90% of us are on the same team. Don't let them lie to your face. No.
This is a question for you all. How can people stay engaged after the election on a local level, especially with Project 2025 or anything else? How do people stay engaged?
Just get civically engaged. start tuning into all of the legislation so like just stay informed. I don't think that you're never too young or too old to start organizing. I just started 4 years ago, right after we started marching for Breonna Taylor. And it's crazy because right now they are back in trial for the same things. So just organize, like I said, reach out. Just get informed. There are plenty political education classes going on all the time in the city. And if you don't know how to politicize your own issues, get with somebody that can help you so that you can get aligned with who you need to talk to and try to fix what you're passionate about.
So I'll say this, I posted the other day, my job is to vote, but your job starts at the ballot booth, it does not end there. That is actually just the beginning step. Once you cast your ballot, it is your job, my job, and everybody else's job to be critically engaged in the process every step of the way. Far too often, we take our eye off the ball. The candidate we want gets elected, or the bill that we're pushing for gets passed, and all of a sudden we kind of say, like, hey, good, things are great. And what we need to remember is that the opposition never stops coming. Next week we're going to release the State Black Global Report, small club. But I wrote an essay in there that says it's always Halloween. For those of you who like horror flicks, you know the horror series Halloween, Michael Myers. And every Halloween, Michael Myers shows up. And it's the same way with the opposition. It don't matter what's going to happen. Michael Myers is showing up. He is always coming. The opposition is always coming. It doesn't matter when they lost. They lost the Civil War, guess what? They were still coming. They lost the Reconstruction, they were still coming. They lost half the Brown v. Board, they were still coming. See, they're going to always continue to come. So it's on us to always be prepared, to always be ready to fight, and to always be thinking about the next step, because they are strategized, they are organized, and they are prepared, because they are always coming. We have to do the same.
Because you all are sending me things, I want to get through these questions, so let's just keep rolling. Go ahead.
Nico spoke, Nino spoke excellently about this point. The people that are in office that you voted for, you didn't vote for, the people in office work for you. And so you can still communicate more candidly what you actually believe when you call them than you can with putting a vote in. You can say, man, out of these two candidates, I think one could win. Even though the person I want can't win, I'm going to vote for this one. But once this one's in office, I'm going to tell them everything that I disagree about that I need them to do. And you keep telling them, because they have to document that. They have to keep track of that. And the people that are working for them are like, hey, 60% of the people who are calling you are saying this. Maybe you should change. So, in terms of after voting, tell them what you actually believe. Tell them what you actually want to happen.
Thank you. Anybody up here know who was responsible for the stimulus checks that we received?
Congress is responsible for the stimulus check. And the reason you got it late, let me tell you why you got it late. You got it late because somebody want to put their name on it.
Amen.
Right? Joe Biden or Ronald Reagan or Obama could put their name on the stimulus checks they handed out. Bush gave us a stimulus check. Was his name on it? W's name wasn't on it. Obama gave us a stimulus check. Was his name on it? No, because they don't give the money. Congress gave the money. Congress fought for the money. And then all he did is sign. Okay, this is exactly.
It was a black woman, blanking on her name, who actually held it up, because what we need to understand is that stimulus check was actually rejected initially. And it had to come back, because she said, hold up, we need to do this. And she was able to gather the votes to get it approved, so the check could go out. And then to Felicia's point, it got held up because somebody wanted their signature on it. But remember, that person did not actually want those checks to go out to the person.
So the reason I ask this question is because there are so many people who talk about money that may have flowed in the prior administration and who gets credit for a stimulus check. So what I hear you saying, I think, is that the person who was president held everything up because he wanted his name on the checks, but it was actually a Democratic Congress that voted to give us stimulus checks. I just want us to know the facts. Vote for who you want to vote for, but you need to understand the facts. Somebody else has not heard about Project 2025 or anything else here? Go ahead, Linda, you want to say President Pryor? I like calling him President Pryor.
No, I don't have any at this point, at least not on Project 2025.
Go ahead, say what you want to say.
So one thing I guess I will make sure is, for the folks who are here, the folks who are watching, I feel confident most of y'all gonna go vote, right? Like that, there's a lot of people green in the room, I know y'all gonna show up and go vote. The question is, who are you taking with you? So part of the reason why we engaged in Soul Symposium this year, and everybody is partnering with Grace and lots of other congregations, is because we wanted to galvanize lots of people to get out to the polls. Turnout is everything in an election. And they are depending on you not to show up. When we talk about the attacks towards black men, and there are literally billions of dollars being poured into social media messaging, targeting black men in particular, to tell them what's wrong with a certain candidate, why you should vote for her, and all of these sort of things. The goal is not, understand, the goal is not to persuade them to vote the other side. They don't actually care about that. They simply want them to stay at home. Because if you don't go vote, that is like voting. And so they don't need you to go and vote for the other side. They simply need you to stay at home. And so what is important for all of us to do is to make sure that whatever sphere of influence you have, you are asking people very intentionally, what is your plan to go vote? Are you going to go vote? Come on and go with me. One of the things that I've said to a congregation, this stuff isn't all that sophisticated. Like I think sometimes we like to believe that, people who go vote are extra prepared and know all the things. Voting is a social gathering. That's really all it is. People go vote the same way they go to the club. Like you go into the club, I guess I put my shoes on and go. Right? Like that is how that works for the majority of people. There was a report since we in the church. There was a research report done several years ago about church attendance. And I think over 75% of the folks who said that they did not go to church were asked why. The reason they said is because nobody ever asked you. Right? That's why people didn't go to church, simply because nobody ever asked them to go. But guess why a whole lot of people don't go? Because nobody ever asked. And so it is on us to reach out to whether that be grandkids, sisters, brothers, aunties, uncles, mom, dad, whoever it is, because you know who's not going to vote in your family. Because they ain't never voted. You know who they are. And so are you talking to them, whether it be the neighbors on the street or whoever? Are you going to go vote? Come on, go vote. We're going to go vote on Saturday. Let's go. You can ride with me. You got a problem? Let's go. What do you need? We have to be proactive in getting people to turn out the vote. If we really want to see change, we just need people to show up.
I got another question here about just generally why people may be distrusting of the Democratic Party specifically, and especially maybe black men. That's the question that's being asked. And anybody can answer. I'll take a couple of answers on this one.
Because there's still a lot of things wrong in this country. Like, that is an absolute fact. We have not achieved the progress and success that we deserve and are owed in this country. That is the fundamental truth. And neither party has managed to do that. And both parties, at times, have completely went to bed when they had the opportunity to do the right thing. Those are facts. And I think it is important that we never run away from those truths. That this country has never lived up to its promise to black people. Ever. That being said, there are real things at stake. And there is a real choice. And so nobody's going to get everything they want from either candidate. Let me be very clear. If you think that all your promises are going to come true, they're not. They will not. Let me go and disappoint you right now. They are not going to happen. It's just not going to come to fruition. However, things will be substantially worse for our community one way or another.
Anybody else real quick, real fast?
I'll tell you this, change is a spiral, not a mountain, it's a hill. From my religious background, I couldn't eat when I was younger, Could eat cookies, bread. We had to read every label of everything we ate because we did not eat pork. Now I can go in the store and I have a plethora of choices, but it took longer than 30 years. But it took a while, right? So I think what we need to understand is you're not going to get everything you want ever, but you're not going to get everything you want now. You have to really think about what has happened over. I mean, we never thought we'd get a black president. I have a 90-year-old grandmother, and we had a black president on the Democratic ticket. So just think about that before you start saying one party is suspicious or not.
And Dr. Ellison, let me ask you this question. How can stakeholders in the education sector advocate for policy changes to protect the integrity of public education when it comes to anything, and especially Amendment 2?
So that's a great question, Madam Moderator. I've got 3 things on here real quick. Promise, I'm a little Baptist preacher sometimes, so 3 points. Number 1, fully fund education. So that means several things. That means wraparound services, mental health support for marginalized communities, students who have challenges that need specific interventions. You fund them. It means that you fully fund transportation. Y'all know what we lived through, and y'all know what choices our board had to make, and ain't nobody happy about that. Even those of us who show up at 3332 Newburgh Road every single day to work. But it's because we are not fully funded to get our kids from home to school. The other one is increasing teacher pay when it comes to money. Educators are not paid what they deserve. That's why we have vacancies like we have. It's not a livable vocation anymore. So you got to fully fund education. Second, focus on an accountability that's real. Accountability system is real. Our accountability system right now in the state is a proxy for poverty. If you are poor and don't have good resources at home, you are not going to score well on tests, and your school's going to look quote unquote bad. It feeds the good school, bad school narrative because we don't focus on what educators do with kids to grow kids from where they start in August to when they exit that grade in May. So a real accountability system really looks at what's done. And then the last one is fund universal pre-K. And to resource locations and all of the resources that are necessary to make that happen, and to support the folks who need the help getting their kids started on the right path to education.
Thank you so much. Another question for you all. How can stakeholders how can organizers and activists work together to encourage the importance of Black voters and to raise awareness about the impact of legislation, local and national, on our daily lives? How do we work together to do this?
Real quickly, Project 2025 is just a bunch of people like coming together, conservatives of course, but they just coming together saying like these are our ideas, we're gonna align with our ideas, our values, and like this is what we want. But that's only one vision of the future. What's ours? What do we want to see in the future? That's how we do it.
I would say stop recreating the wheel. We have got to do better as community organizers in working together and not being redundant and duplicative in terms of what our efforts are. There is so much brilliance and opportunity among us, but so many of us want to do our own thing. We want the credit, we want to be able to take, ownership of it and say, I did this. Listen, I understand that, I truly do, but it is killing us because there is so much that we can do, so much more that we can do together than doing apart. And so we gotta set egos aside, we gotta set our own desires aside and say, how can we do this together? We don't need a bunch more organizations. We need a bunch more people in the organizations that have doing the work with people and doing the work. So we gotta work together.
Two more quick questions. I'm trying to get everything out of this group, these phenomenal folks that we possibly can. Reputable, I'll answer this one. Where are reputable sources for people to fact check and research the issues besides trying to Google? You can do a Google search, but you just need to click into the things that Google says. You can't take the answer that comes up, that says the church pews were purple. You gotta look at, okay, who made the pews? Where were they? Let me see the pictures. Let me see. You gotta dig a little bit deeper. You can use Google, but you gotta go further. Also, if you are a certain age, I think you can still go to classes for free in some of these universities. There also are some wonderful teachers. One of them here at Bates. There are plenty of others in other places. The NAACP, the Urban League, some of these other organizations are out here. They're having education stuff all the time. There's a Pan-African Studies department at the University of Louisville. We used to have free community classes. There are other things. Anybody got anything else to add there real quick?
What you find should be in multiple places.
Okay.
So if your answer is only found on one website, and it's got a real long web address, it's not inaccurate. You can't go to a reputable source and find that same information, that's probably going to be a problem.
How can you search for
Facts come with the slant of who's giving them. So don't just find the fact, you gotta figure out who it's coming from. Find out what you can about the actual source that you're looking at, and then you have your bias against or for that source.
And I would just say be careful of misinformation and stay off of social media.
And how can you search for legit political organizations to participate with and political courses to take affordably? Anybody got a quick answer? One person. Go ahead.
The People's University is always offering free political education classes, so you can just look them up on Facebook, the People's University.
Excellent. Also, the ACLU's got some great stuff again. I always fall back on Urban League of whether it's national, local, NAACP, Legal Defense Fund. There are all kinds of important. Yell them out, people. I think it's important for us to make sure we are connected with all of these organizations in our country that are, say again? NCNW, National Conference of Negro Women. There are all kinds of organizations out here doing this work all of the time. Anything else? Okay, I would like these folks, we're getting ready to wrap up, so whoever's supposed to come after me, get ready. But before we do, I would like to give everybody a final word. And I just want to say to you all, part of what I think the challenge is in this country is that we have and we need people who don't have an education so that they can work certain jobs. And I hear a lot of folks talking about college is not for everybody, and I think that's true. College may not be for everybody, but it sure enough ought to be for us. Because anything that was ever illegal to do, we ought to be making sure that we are doing it as often and for as long as humanly possible. And I won't send my kids to college when white folks stop sending theirs, and that's real talk. And we are doing what we need to do to begin to level the playing field. We have a wealth gap in this country. We have a health gap in this country. We are living in food deserts and income deserts and all of the things. And we need to make sure we are doing everything in our power to change the world that we leave for the people who come after us. And I want to say to these 6 people on this panel and the folks that were here before, you are phenomenal. You are what hopeful. You got tough jobs, we know that, but you do them so well. And we in this community probably don't say enough thank you. We probably don't recognize enough the excellence that we have in this city. Because Kentucky is not a smart state. We are not high up on any education list. We don't need to be attacking education. We need to be fixing it. We need to be funding it. So anytime you hear any politician talking about attacking education, they are the idiots and the insane that they talk about in Amendment 1. I want to be clear about that. We cannot afford to attack education in Kentucky because we need more people like the ones on this panel. So give me some words. We got one sentence or a short paragraph. Start with Felicia Newman because she's struck. Go.
First of all, that's my stuff.
Okay.
place at the Louisville Urban League. We have all this stuff that they're talking about. I need everybody out there to look at our website, look what we have to offer. We just started a policy department. This is one of my lovely employees. And we need you.
Pass the mic. Thank you. Keep going.
Ever since I started organizing, I said this country owes me everything any good, so let's get that what's up.
Because criminal justice reform is my passion, I would say when you are exercising your vote that matters, look for candidates who want to focus on making our communities better by investing in education, in substance abuse treatment, in mental health treatment, in healthcare reform, instead of incarceration, because that is what in fact will make our communities safer.
I will echo what the first panel said in my own way, is every complaint or gripe you have is tied to a vote. If you are concerned about anything, it is tied to a vote. If you want to see a change, get out there, make your voice heard, and make your perspective known.
I'll say connect with people. You can be a leader or you can be a follower. It doesn't matter. If you connect with people, you're going to be more powerful.
I would just say knowledge is power. Don't fall for the okie-doke. Make sure you are informed. There's plenty of misinformation and disinformation floating around. Know what the issues are, know where you stand, and exercise your voice.
Absolutely. And I want to say this. Catherine brought up a quote directly from Project 2025 that says, the next conservative administration should do everything possible to obtain finality for the 44 prisoners currently on federal death row. Think about that, process that as you go to vote. And I want to say thank you to the members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Thank you to it's my pleasure to serve as your moderator. Thank you.
All right, family. Corinza Townsend here, Chief Administrative Officer for our new Norton West Louisville Hospital. You are here right outside of our community room. I'm excited to remind you about our block party this Saturday, October 26th. Starting at 11 o'clock, we will unveil a beautiful monument that will represent folks from the 1800s to the 1900s who represent the pioneers of healthcare here in West Louisville. Right after that, at 12 o'clock, we will kick off the block party. Come party with me. See you soon.
The lights of Kentucky Performing Arts shine on more than our shows. They illuminate a pathway of discovery for all throughout our Commonwealth. A pathway of creativity, confidence, possibility, of brilliance, inspiration, curiosity, and wonder. For 40 years, Kentucky Performing Arts has led a pathway to unite the Commonwealth around the joy of discovering the arts, and will continue to shine this light far into the future.
If you do nothing else.
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 If you do nothing else.